Not as far as I know. If your tablet has a setting, if your tablet has a setting, so for example, Wacom has a thing. Here, let me see if I can find it for you. But if you have something like this, you see this right here? So what this it means is that if your tablet doesn't match the aspect ratio of your screen, so like if you have a 16 by 9 screen, but your tablet isn't 16 by 9, you know, by dimensions, you can tell your tablet to force proportions, which means that like it'll be an even kind of shape against your screen space. And so basically what that means is that if you don't have something like this turned on, what's going to happen is that it's not going to match your screen shape, and you're going to move faster in one direction than the other direction. And so if you're drawing a circle, you know, if I draw a circle, it looks something like this, you know, not perfect, but relatively even all around. However, if my tablet was longer vertically like this, right? What would happen is that I would be moving slower. I think it's slower, right? I would be moving slower up and down due to the fact that I need to travel more of my tablet in order to travel more of my screen, in which case my circles would end up looking more like this if I don't adjust my movements, because, you know, I have to move more up and down than I do left and right to produce an even circle, for example. When it comes to doing like specific type of poses, it's really up to you what you want to do, because action poses and natural, kind of more neutral poses are going to have their own challenges and niche things that you have to pay attention to. So it's really up to you which ones that you should be doing or shouldn't be doing. If you're working to build together a portfolio, then of course you want some kind of relative balance, or just one that appeals more to what you plan on doing. Assuming though that you're not at that point, since I think you asked me about this stuff recently. And I'd probably just focus on whatever you feel more you know, is more relevant to your interests or your studies that you want to improve on. For moving on from studies and getting into like actual pieces, that's also a matter of like, do you feel kind of comfortable doing pieces? Because really, it's up to how you feel about it. I don't like making this sound super vague, but that's really what it is, I would say. Because whether you do pieces or not are really up to you. Hello, Gaming Geek. It's really up to what you want to do, what you feel like is relevant to you. That said, I think in order to figure out like some tips on how to figure out when you feel or should feel comfortable is when you've kind of achieved the goals that you're looking for from your studies. Because when you're doing your studies, one of your goals might be to achieve a certain type of effect, or, you know, to better understand a certain aspect of lighting or color or whatever thing that you're trying to practice. And so when you sort of achieve that vague kind of understanding that you were looking for originally, then maybe it's time to do a piece to sort of get an idea of how well you understand that thing that you learned. And then once the piece is done, you can consider going back to doing studies to improve on anything that you felt was lacking or wasn't as good as you thought it would be, or things like that that are relevant to skills that you need to improve and whatnot. Because that's always an option. I've said before that like what I do is that I do a lot of like research on stuff that I could be doing, kind of the techniques involved in those skills, and maybe I want to implement those techniques into a practice piece of mine, and then if I feel like I really want to challenge myself and test how well I understand it, I'll start on something that feels more like a complete piece. So And then once the complete piece is done, I reevaluate, and then I go back to doing things that are more on the experimental side or the more practice-oriented side. How did you find or create your style? I'm currently in a style crisis of programming creating so quickly. I've been drawn by different people. That's just the lack of fundamentals, I'm telling you. I didn't find my style. In fact, I still don't think I have a style. But I have shared stylistic choices that I make in each picture that I intentionally choose because it's based on my understanding, and I think based on my fundamentals, they look good. And so my drawings aren't really based on a style or a made style or any intentionality when it comes to sort of the way they overall look. It's more of just a culmination of what I understand. I can't help but draw like this, you see. It's not because I decided that I would draw like this, it's because I can't help but draw like this, because this is how I understand how to draw. And so really it's just solidifying your understanding of art in general that creates a style. Because your style doesn't come from some kind of choice you made that suddenly you're going to draw a certain way. Your style comes from how you see the world and how you understand art and the concepts you understand. Your understanding of color theory, lighting, composition, all this character design, stuff like that. All of that comes together to create who you are as an artist, not the other way around. So I don't know what to tell you about finding a style, and most commonly the lack of consistency comes from the lack of fundamentals because you're not using you're using different operations for each kind of painting or drawing that you do. Because without fundamentals, you kind of grasp at straws, look at a lot of different artists to try and understand why they look nice without actually, you know, considering as much the building blocks of it. So if you're not using the same building blocks everywhere in all your pieces, then of course your work's not going to look the same. And if you don't know what those building blocks are, it's only going to be harder to sort of put it together. This is just an assumption though, because that is the most common case of inconsistency. It's the most common source of inconsistency. Someone not using the same fundamentals for every piece they do. How can you explain how ambient light works, please? I've explained ambient light before. I'm not sure if you were there for it. I don't mind explaining. Ambient light is just because it depends on what you mean by ambient light, because ambient light is one thing, but the word ambient light just refers to any light that bounces off of any other surfaces. So ambient light, typically the main thing for me personally that helped me understand ambient light is just knowing that ambient light doesn't influence direct light, or at least it does, but it's so insignificant that you shouldn't really bother including that interaction in your artwork. Because direct light just wipes the floor with ambient light, so it's just like, get out of here, and ambient light is mostly going to be affecting your shadows. If there's something about ambient light you're confused about, you can try formulating a question. I know it's hard to make a question about it if it's something that's giving you trouble. Oshiko, Silly Girl, and Mike Toon, thanks for following. Any tips on making art look less stiff? That's a very general thing, because art can look stiff for a variety of reasons. Art can look stiff for a variety of reasons. The core thing is that your pose is stiff, right? So what Selen says, gesture drawing, will solve that. If your poses are stiff and it's lifeless, it's not, doesn't feel like there's a sense of movement, that's going to be your #1 thing to learn: gesture drawing from life, drawing people in motion, people, because that's what tells you what's natural and what's alive, what's, you know, normal. And there's certain poses that are much more effective for that than others too. Lolzy is asking, any tips on growing an art platform? That's a tough question, because a lot of it is luck. And the other side of it is just whatever you can do. Usually for growing an art platform, you have to pick a main one. You can't just like fiddle between them. I feel like that's usually a bad call for someone getting started. I'm no expert on it because all I do is just I work, right? And I steadily grow. I didn't blow up or anything. We've just been steadily growing for a while now. And the idea is consistency. The main thing is consistency. You've probably heard this before already, but I have to make it clear. That's one of the most important things about growing on a platform. It's having an upload schedule, a streaming schedule, anything to kind of get people to know when to expect stuff. And kind of also just a general, I want to say like a not an identity, but like a mood or like a feel, I guess. Because like everybody's got a sort of thing people come to see. I just do my thing here. My stream is always about just trying to improve, get better, providing tips and resources for stuff, and sharing what I've learned through my own practice with people. I think that's usually what people come to expect from my work, and you know, my work has a certain look to it based on that practice and whatnot. And you need a good line of communication, whether that's Twitter, Instagrams, like Instagram posts where you're informing people. I think Instagram's probably the weakest in this aspect. You usually have to double up on something else. You don't just grow only on Instagram. I don't recommend it. Discord is a great line of communication. Having a YouTube. It's just wherever you decide to make your home base. That's your kind of line of communication. People should have a way to reach you and kind of get to know you. Yeah!
Oreo.
I gotta eat an Oreo on the 0. The 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh!
It's going up now.
Mmm.
Happy New Year.
Mmm.